Okay, so this is an embarrassing one to put out there into the world. But one time I drove 6 hours to a conference and forgot my console. I'm the sound person and I forgot the soundboard. Okay, so the way it all went down, I was working for a production company through a long series of logistics. If you've done this, you know. I didn't load the trailer. The guys that were loading the trailer, it was just this whole mishmash of gear that was getting passed around, kind of a mess. So I didn't load the trailer. And I also wasn't able to leave until the day of the service. So the service was that evening. I wasn't even able to leave until that morning. So if everything goes according to plan, it's still a really tight day. So I get to our warehouse before the sun comes up and I'm just kind of going through the trailer, I'm looking around, just making sure I see stuff, I'm half asleep, you know how it goes. And, I say, "Oh yeah, this is great. Everything's here." And so I closed the trailer up and I hit the road. And I was by myself. I was meeting a lighting guy there. So I'm driving by myself and everything. So I get, 2 to 3 hours down the road and I'm going through this, big city by my standards at least. And it hit me. It absolutely came out of nowhere. I wasn't even thinking about this. I was actually listening through the Lord of the Rings audiobook at the time. So I'm going down the road listening to Lord of the Rings, and it just dawns on me. I didn't see the console case. And this one, it was at the time, like this channel, goodness, it was an X32, which has a fairly distinct looking case. And it's real thin. And yeah, it just hit me. I didn't see the case. And I know that just the way that we typically pack those trailers, that case didn't really fit anywhere like a puzzle with our gear. It was always on the very back, and I didn't see it. So I pull over on the side of the interstate in the middle of, at this point, it's what, 10 in the morning, 9, 10 in the morning, something maybe, I don't know. It's somewhere around in there. Pull over in traffic, and it's not there. I crawl all the way to the front. I'm like, maybe they put it in first. I don't know why they would have done that, and it's definitely not there. But I crawled on top of everything on the side of the interstate. I was just desperate. I was desperate, embarrassed, everything. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What in the world am I going to do about this? The way this day was going on a perfect schedule, it was already going to be tough to get everything really going, get sound checked, heck, eat before the first service. It was just one of those days. So I called the boss and he says, "All right, no worries. I know a production company nearby where you're going." So he gives them a call and says, "Just keep driving. I'll figure this out. You get there, get everything else as set up as you possibly can, and we'll figure it out." I said, "All right." So I just put all my focus on getting everything set up. And I literally got to the point in the day after I finally got there. I ran everything. We got lighting, we got audio, everything set up. And I had cables laying on the floor at front of house. And the band is basically ready to go. And I'm like, I don't even have a board here. Oh, it was a disaster. So by that point, I was getting pretty well panicked. But we found a company that was nearby that my boss knew, and they just so happened to be driving by around that time in the day. They would be coming back through, and they had a console that we could use. And so they drop off this Soundcraft. I don't remember what it was, the UI, whatever. I don't remember. But it was one of the lower end, cheaper Soundcraft consoles. I had never used it. And so I've basically got a bunch of cables sitting there at front of house, and this console I've never even seen in person before. I was aware of them, but I never used it. And so we roll up. I just plug everything as one to one as possible, open up the scene that they had there last, and tried to patch everything one to one, and just pulled up almost like a virtual set or like I'd done a virtual sound check with their scene, and just was like, I hope that the dude that's on here last knew something. And so we pulled up the scene, and yeah, I went to Tweakin and we got it sound checked and made the sound check happen. Ended up being a great weekend, all that. So all that say, it was extremely stressful, very stressful, but I learned a lot that day. One, don't forget your console, then you don't have to learn other lessons. But honestly, over the years since that happened, one thing that I've really come to think about on when I think back on that day is the superpower of adaptability. We're going to brush off the fact that this could have been avoided. Being adaptable a lot of times has more to do with you're sprung into a situation, you have stuff just brought on you without your control, all that. We're gonna act like that I could have, that this was unavoidable. Thinking about that situation, that's an extreme. I realize that's an extreme situation, but we run into issues all the time on any Sunday morning, any Wednesday night. There's always going to be little problems along the way. And I just so believe that being adaptable is one of the absolute greatest traits you can have, really, if you're serving anywhere. But, we're focusing here on sound and media. And in these roles in church, stuff goes wrong all the time. People are late. People cancel on your last minute. Gear breaks. There are things that are out of your control. And if you can be adaptable in those, it's a great trait to have that as a byproduct serves others well. So let me explain. When you picture a sound person, a sound guy, what's the first thing that, usually comes to mind? A lot of times it's an old dude with a ponytail that is mad all the time, doesn't get along with anyone, sits grumpily in the corner, and then gripes whenever anyone asks them to do anything. Harsh, maybe rude, but ask anyone out there in the real world, and a lot of times that's the stereotype. It's so often we have that kind of view of sound people because it's just the way that we've seen them in the past. And so I think that in this situation, it's a great example of I had every right to be mad, to be mean to everyone around me because I was stressed out. But even in that moment, I was making friends with the people around me. The band was chill because I wasn't panicking on the outside. I was panicking on the inside, don't get me wrong. But they stayed calm because I was calm. They knew that I was doing every single thing in my power to make it work. And we did. And I think we really made it work with not that many headaches, honestly. It actually came out really smooth in the end. And on that topic of being adaptable, being chill, being kind to those around you. Now, side note here, you need to be direct a lot of times. There is a time when directness goes a long way, but you do that in a respectful way. But on the topic of being adaptable, staying calm under pressure, those traits, what I've kind of come to realize is, I guess I would say it this way, that those traits silently train and teach those around you. So let me explain what I mean by that. Someone comes up and they want to use a handheld microphone. They're holding it wrong. What you might see a lot of times out in the real world is the sound guy gets all annoyed and can, hard to say, talk into the microphone rather than gently instructing to the point that they do it right. And then, you give some positive reinforcement. There comes a point that, your pastor, you're helping them put their microphone on, the headset microphone. They are using, maybe a lapel, whatever the microphone they're using. They might not, they're likely not an expert on it. They actually don't know about that stuff. And what happens is a lot of times we that know this stuff, we put a lot of expectations on other people to do things right the first time when they don't have a clue how to use this gear. They don't even know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing with it. Other than, hey, I need to say something to people, they don't actually know how to hold the microphone. And so what happens when you stay level-headed in those situations, when you don't get stressed out because someone around you does something wrong, what it causes is those on stage to trust you more. The band trusts you. Your pastor respects your input. Your volunteers around you learn by observation. Really, what I see it as is you become a quiet instructor. There's always, of course, a time to directly instruct, to tell people what to do, to get things done. Absolutely. But I think what we miss a lot of times, we overemphasize, maybe a big training session or something, when in reality, we can do a lot of instructing moment by moment when the people around us observe us doing something correctly, and you may just point out, hey, this is how you do it. I think a lot of times demonstration can actually teach more than lecturing, and that spills over into how you handle situations. And when you are actively adaptable, when you're in a rough situation, when something goes wrong on a Sunday, and you're able to step in, calmly make it happen, people will also see what you're doing, but also how you handle yourself in those situations. And I think that in church especially, I honestly think that there's just a very high standard for how we handle ourselves in those situations. It's right in line with ministry. There's things that you wouldn't accept of your pastor or of someone who's serving on the stage. There's certain behaviors, there's certain ways of handling situations that wouldn't be accepted of those people. And I think that we need to put those on the booth as well. The bottom line is you'll mess up. I mess up. I mess up all the time. But a lot of times people don't know it, as I am able to hide it pretty well. And I think in those moments, whenever our mess ups do spill over into the room and it affects other people, I think that we can so use those moments to grow ourselves, to demonstrate why they should trust us in this position in the first place. Because when you stay adaptable, when you stay calm under stress, I don't think it shows in a way that you don't care. I think it shows in a way that you have this quiet authority that I've got this handled. And to me, that's leadership, whether other people call it that or not. I hope this has helped you today. If it has, share it with your worship team, share it with your sound and media team. Tell them about my channel. I share stuff like this weekly for both training your team and for tech tips. So I'll see you guys in the next one.